The aim of this exhibit is to help everyone connect with a history which has been lost to us in the first person. And our goal was to ensure that we remembered the soldiers as people, not as icons of remembrance. It was not possible for us to have a First World War soldier here for the opening, but it is possible for us to have the son of a Great War soldier here, and that individual is Mr. Paul Almond. Paul is distinguished hardly hits it on the head, but a highly distinguished, famous Canadian film director, best-selling author. And his father, Eric, served as a gunner in the Great War. And we are channeling Eric Almond here. We have his medals and some of the accoutrements that he wore during the Great War. For me, Eric Almond is very much the everyman in terms of a Great War gunner. He joined as a private soldier, he rose to the rank of lieutenant, he was wounded in action several times. He fought with the Canadian Expeditionary Force beginning on the Somme right through to the beginning of the 100 Days Offensive, which ended the war. And he also suffered incredibly from post-traumatic stress after that conflict. And he does represent in so many ways the experience of so many individuals. And so we are very pleased to have Paul here to cut the ribbon on behalf of his father and on behalf of all Canadian gunners who served in the Great War. We are also pleased to be giving you a copy of Paul's book, The Gunner, which is a fictionalized account of his father's service in the Great War. And that is being done to help you make that personal connection to the Great War. It is a fictionalized but highly accurate account of what life was like for gunners at the front. And we hope that by reading that, it will create for you that connection, I think, that we all crave and miss now that there are no surviving Great War veterans. And I also wish to note for the Patricias in the crowd, because this exhibit is also intended to honor the centennial of the foundation of Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, that Paul Almond personally knew Brigadier General Andrew Hamilton Galt, who was the founder of the regiment. And so if there are Patricias in the crowd, you may want to talk to Paul afterwards and find out what Hemi Galt was really like. And of course the exhibit is intended also to honor the centennial of the riding of in Flanders Fields next May. And so it will run from now until the 28th of June next year. So don't feel rushed when you're going through it. And so at this time I would like to ask Mr. Paul Almond to come forward and make some remarks.
Well, first of all, I want to say that I'm really honored that Mark chose me to represent my father, who was a gunner, as he said, in World War I. And my father fought through every major Canadian battle in the war. You know, Ypres, Vimy Ridge, Passchendaele, the Somme, and the 100 Days. And I'm not only here to represent my father, I'm really here to represent all the Canadian gunners who fought so bravely through that dreadful conflict. They brought honor upon the Royal Canadian Artillery and upon our country. Many of them died in defense of their country, and many more were wounded, and even more were afflicted by the dreadful shell shock which beset my own father, and ended up terminating his fruitful life as a clergyman, so that soon after I was born, he committed himself to the living hell of a military hospital, which, however well run, in those days really didn't know what to do with what we now call PTSD. And I want to add a personal note. Many people have said to me, in writing this book, did you talk to your father? And it's difficult to say, but I never knew him, because he went into the hospital when he was 2. And isn't it a wonderful thing, I think, for him, a lowly Shigawak lad who joined up, died when I was at Oxford, so I came back, to know that he is somehow brought into this presence of this wonderful artillery museum and remembered here with us today. I think he would have been very proud. Now, I also want to say that my book, The Gunner, which tells of World War I through a gunner's eyes, was mostly really written and created by Major Mark George. Frankly, I know nothing about the Army. My book started back in 1800, and when I got to World War I, the most significant event, I believe, in our military history, I was suddenly thought I have to write it. My daddy's a gunner, what do I do? And I finally, through the thanks to Danny Fortin, who's running the base in Quebec now, brought me to Mark, and Mark every day was on the email, every night he was on the phone, he was telling me, well, what's a battalion? Well, it's this. Well, what's... So he really wrote this book. So he doesn't just run this museum, Mark George. He contributed to the film Passchendaele, and my own book, and countless other documentaries and writings all across. So we're so lucky here in Shilo to have this humble genius at the forefront of our museum. So now here at the Royal Canadian Artillery Museum in the Canadian Forces Base in Shilo, Manitoba, in the presence of Mark George, its mastermind, and Kathleen Christensen, its curator, I hereby declare their splendid World War I exhibit open.